I've spent most of my life being the one who held things together. My hands are rough from years of holding and mending. I remember when Andre was just a boy, all he needed was my love, my time. Now, he needed a car for college. I gave up space in my savings account for that car. I gave up space in my marriage, my time, my body, all to make sure that boy had what he needed. Every step of the way, I gave. I'd built this house, not just with bricks, but with my hands, my sweat. And when Andre and his wife, Kendra, came to stay after their wedding, I didn't hesitate. Of course, they could move in. The house was big enough, with 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. I thought I'd be the one in my room, and they'd take the guest room. We'd share meals, share space like family, just like we used to. But Kendra, she had other plans. From the first day, I knew something was off. She walked in with those sunglasses on, indoors, as if she were already the queen of the castle. She didn't call me Mama D like Andre did. No, she just called me Dolores, like I was some tenant she barely knew. I didn't mind much at first. I wasn't raised to fuss. But that night, when she complained about the mattress in the guest room, I felt a little flicker of something cold. "It's too stiff," she said, "and it's hurting my back." Andre gave me that look across the dinner table. I could already see it coming. "Ma," he said, "what if Kendra and I use the master for now? You're smaller. You don't need all that space." I blinked. "Andre, your daddy and I slept in that room for 30 years. "I know, Ma," he said, "but Kendra's got her back. You know, her back will be fine," I thought, but I didn't say it. I just nodded. That night, I slept in the master bedroom anyway. It was my bed, my room, my memories. But the next day when I came home from the market, my things were packed in boxes, stacked outside the door. The door was locked. I stood there in the hallway, staring at my life in cardboard. Andre came out of the kitchen like nothing had happened. "Oh yeah," he said, "we moved some stuff to give you space. We figured it'd be easier this way. You can use the guest room without asking. Come on, don't make this a big thing." Kendra appeared behind him, wearing my satin robe like it was hers. She had rollers in her hair and a mug that said Queen. She smirked at me. That night, I slept in the guest room, on a stiff mattress, with a broken closet door and one outlet that didn't work. The room was cold, drafty, my knees ached, but I didn't say a word. I was raised to endure, but endurance has its limits. The next day Kendra had her friends over for brunch. I wasn't invited. I heard them laughing in the other room about how some people, some old people, just don't know when to step back. Later, I found my wedding portrait face down in the hallway closet. My husband's army medals were tossed in a shoebox under the paint cans. My photo albums were shoved aside to make room for Kendra's skincare fridge. Andre avoided my eyes when I asked him about it. "Don't worry, Ma," he whispered to her one night. "She's quiet. She adjust. My house, my life, my memories." Then it got worse. They put a new lock on the master bedroom door. Not just a turn knob, but a keypad lock. When I asked for the code, Andre said, "It's just for privacy. You know, boundaries. Boundaries in my own house." They were building their future. I was just the past. They never said it out loud, but every sigh, every shrug, every closed door screamed it. One weekend, I tried to make Sunday dinner, the way we always did. Fried chicken, greens, cornbread, Andre's favorites. But Kendra waltzed in halfway through and said, "Oh, we're doing takeout tonight. My stomach's too sensitive for all this grease." Andre just nodded along. They ate sushi in the master bedroom. I ate alone at the dining table, the one I bought with my first tax refund. No blessing. No, thank you. Just silence. I wasn't silent for long. They thought I was too quiet to fight. They thought I'd just sit back and endure. But silence can be a weapon. They didn't know I was already watching. Kendra filled my house with noise. She invited her sisters over nearly every weekend. Andre let their friends crash on the living room couch. I started finding eyelashes in my sink, nail glue on the kitchen table, foundation stains on the arm of my late husband's recliner. When I asked Kendra to be careful, she just laughed and said, "If it bothers you, maybe don't sit there." It was the same chair I held Andre in when he had asthma attacks at night. The same chair his father sat in to read him bedtime stories. I cleaned it with a wet cloth that night. The stain didn't come out. I didn't try again. Kendra turned the dining room into a content corner for her YouTube channel. She hung up a ring light and put up a white backdrop. My grandmother's lace doilies were stuffed in a box behind it. "Vintage doesn't get clicks," she said. One day, I came home from the pharmacy and found all my china packed up and labeled for donation. I stood there for a long time, staring at the boxes. Kendra walked in, wearing one of my scarves, holding a half-empty glass of wine. "You like it?" she asked. "Gives me that grown woman vibe." I didn't answer. I just picked up one of the boxes and carried it to my room, the guest room. That night, I knocked on the master bathroom door. My knees were acting up. I just needed the tub. The guest bathroom only had a stand-up shower. And it was slippery. Kendra opened the door halfway, holding a robe closed at the neck. "Is there an emergency?" she asked. "I need to soak. My knees are swelling." Andre appeared behind her. "Ma, we talked about this. That bathroom's our space now. Just use the other one." I stared at him. He couldn't even hold my gaze. They closed the door on me. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Monica. I didn't ask a lot of questions, just told her what was going on. She took notes, told me she'd look into recent comps in the neighborhood, and would begin the paperwork for a partition sale. I didn't tell Andre or Kendra. They never suspected. Kendra started talking about a garden in the backyard. She walked through my yard in heels, pointing at places she'd level out. She said she might tear up the swing set. The day Monica called me to tell me she had a buyer, I told her to go ahead. Full cash, no contingencies. I moved quickly, quietly. I packed only the essentials, some clothes, a few frames, my late husband's pocket watch. Monica had everything ready, and on the morning of the sale, I stood at the door when the sheriff arrived. The eviction was official. Andre and Kendra stood there, stunned. Andre tried to fight it, but Monica told him, "It's too late, legally." I didn't feel the satisfaction they expected. Not then. I drove to my new condo, feeling lighter than I had in years. There were no more doors they could lock, no rooms I couldn't enter, no lies between us. Kendra sent me a message on Facebook calling me toxic and ungrateful. I reported it as harassment, and then Tyler came to visit. She helped me plant a rosebush on my tiny balcony. She asked me if I was going to see Andre again. I told her, "Not unless he comes with honesty in his mouth." She nodded, and we continued planting. The mint was thriving, the tomatoes growing strong. One day, months later, Andre showed up at church. He looked older, worn down. He asked if we could talk. I listened to him. I let him apologize. He said he was lost, trying to prove something to Kendra. He said he didn't know how to apologize enough. I didn't need his apology. What I needed was for him to stand up. For me. "Goodbye, Andre," I said. "You've got 2 more weeks." I closed the door. The night before they left, I made a final meal in my old kitchen. Fried catfish, sweet potatoes, mac and cheese. Not for them, for the house, for the memories. They left, just like that. No goodbyes, no apologies. I moved on in every way except physically. The next morning, I walked back into the house, just me now. It was quiet, too quiet. I stood in the middle of it, in the place where my life used to be. I smiled. It wasn't about the house. It was never about the house. It was about taking back my life, and I did. Every inch. They thought they could erase me, push me into a corner, make me small. But I'm not small. I've got roots that go deep. I'm not invisible. I've reclaimed my peace. I can't be pushed away anymore. This is my life now, and for the first time in a long time, I'm living it. The days after they left were quieter than I ever imagined. It wasn't the emptiness that got to me, though, no. It was the stillness that came with having nothing left to lose. All that noise, the constant disruptions, the feeling that my presence was nothing more than a shadow in my own home. It all faded, leaving behind the kind of silence that's full of possibilities. I was free, but freedom was a strange thing when you'd spent so many years living for someone else. I looked around my new condo. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, small kitchen, a porch with just enough space for 2 rocking chairs. But it was mine. Every morning, I'd sit out on that porch, sipping my tea, feeling the cool breeze against my skin. The roses in my garden bloomed again, stronger than before. There was no one telling me when to water them, no one critiquing the way I arranged the petals. I could smell the lavender I burned every night, filling the space with a calm I hadn't known in years. And for the first time in a long time, I woke up without a weight on my chest, without the dread that someone was going to take away the one thing I had left, myself. I still remember the first time I went to church after moving. I'd stopped going for a while, trying to avoid the questions I didn't have answers for. But that Sunday, Tyler convinced me. She said, "Grandma, you need to get out." I didn't argue. I put on my best church dress, the one I saved for special days, the one my husband used to compliment me on. Tyler helped me pick out my shoes. We walked to the car in silence, the kind of silence that's not heavy but just peaceful. And as I sat there in the pew, listening to the preacher talk about forgiveness, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't about letting others off the hook. No, it's about letting yourself go, letting go of the anger, the bitterness. I wasn't there yet, not completely, but I was getting there. I didn't expect Andre to show up. He hadn't called, he hadn't sent a message. It had been months since I last heard from him, but there he was, standing across the room, looking so different. The weight of what he'd lost was in his eyes. He was tired, not just from the life he was living but from the guilt he couldn't shake. I saw it in the way he stood, in the way he held the plate in his hand. Like it was heavier than it should have been. I didn't move. Tyler did. She saw him first, and I saw the way her face froze. She knew exactly who he was. I didn't even look at him until he walked over to me. "Ma," he said, his voice rough, like it had been months since he last spoke. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to feel the space between us. I wanted him to understand what he had done, what he had taken. I stood up, and slowly, I walked outside with him. We stood under the oak tree in the churchyard, the same place where I had once watched him run around as a little boy. The years felt like a lifetime as we stood there in silence. "I've been thinking about everything," he said, his voice low. "About what I did. About what I let her do. I don't even know how to apologize in a way that feels like enough." I looked at him then, really looked at him. "Then don't try," I said, my words cutting through the air between us. "You handled things all right, Andre. You handled your mother like a piece of furniture." He swallowed hard. "I deserved that," he said, his voice shaky. "You deserved worse," I replied. "But I chose silence. I chose peace." He stood there, lost for words. I could see him trying to find the right thing to say, but there was nothing that could fix what had happened. "Not yet. You lost the house," he whispered. "I lost her. I lost everything." "No," I said softly, but firmly. "You lost me." He didn't speak. He didn't need to. There was nothing left for us to say. His regrets were too late. The damage had been done. But I could see him, in that moment, understanding that this wasn't about the house or the things they took. This was about what they'd taken from me, my dignity, my place in my own life. "You didn't just hurt me, Andre," I said, the words slow, measured. "You erased me. You locked me out of my own room, made me small in my own home, and you stood by while she mocked me. You didn't stand up. That's all I needed you to do. Stand up." I could see the shame in his eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd made his choices and I had made mine. The silence that followed wasn't the same silence that haunted me before. This was different. It was mine. I had found peace in the absence of noise, in the stillness that came after the storm. Tyler walked over, a plate of cobbler in her hand. She didn't say anything, just stood beside me, looking at Andre. He didn't speak to her, not really. He just nodded, and I could see the weight of his regrets settle on his shoulders. "I should go," he said, and I didn't stop him. As he walked away, I felt something lift. Not because he apologized. No, but because I had already reclaimed everything that mattered. He could carry his guilt, but I had carried enough. That night, Tyler and I sat on the balcony. Under the lights we'd hung together, the mint in the garden was thriving, the tomatoes growing strong, and the rose bush had 4 new buds. She looked at me, the way a child looks at a parent, full of hope and questions. "Do you think he really means it?" she asked. I smiled and sipped my tea. "I think he regrets it. And sometimes, that's all people have to offer." "Will you ever let him back in?" she asked, her voice soft, unsure. I thought for a moment, watching the stars above. "Not unless he comes with honesty in his mouth," I said, my voice steady. Tyler nodded, and we both sat there, wrapped in silence. But it wasn't the same silence from before. This one was ours. This one was peace. I reached into my sweater pocket and pulled out a key. I handed it to Tyler. "This is for you," I said. "Always have a place that's yours, no matter who tells you otherwise." Her eyes widened, and she took the key from me, holding it tightly. It was more than just metal. It was a message, one she would carry with her, one she would pass down. "We are not disposable. We are not invisible." I kissed her forehead and leaned back in my chair, looking at the stars. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had already won. I didn't need anything more. As the days passed, I found myself breathing easier. I wasn't rushing to fill every moment with something to distract me from the emptiness, like I used to. No, now, I had a different kind of silence in my life, the kind that lets you think. lets you feel the quietude inside your bones. It wasn't loneliness, it was freedom. Freedom that came with reclaiming my space, my dignity, my life. Tyler came by more often. She always brought light with her, even on the days when the sun barely shone. She'd stand in the doorway with her backpack, the same big brown eyes. Her innocence still intact despite everything that had happened. And every time she smiled, I remembered what mattered. I started feeling like I could be myself again. Not just the mama or the grandmother, but Dolores, the woman who had lived and survived, who had dreams and regrets, who had loved and been left behind. The condo felt like mine, truly mine, in a way that the house never did toward the end. The old house, the one that I had worked for, sacrificed for, cried over it, no longer held the same power over me. I didn't need it to feel whole. I didn't need it to define me anymore. But there were moments, tiny fragments of memory, where the past would slip through the cracks of my peace. I'd wake in the middle of the night, the hum of the refrigerator, soothing in the quiet apartment, and think of Andre. Think of the way he used to look at me with those bright eyes full of hope, the way I'd patch up his wounds as a boy, and how I thought I'd be the one to teach him how to love properly. But somewhere along the way, I lost him, and the worst part wasn't the betrayal. No, the worst part was how he let me slip away so quietly, like I was nothing, like the woman who gave him everything, including the very house he called home, was nothing. One afternoon, as I watered the mint on my balcony, I saw him again, not in person, but in a letter. It came in the mail, a thick envelope, the type of paper you feel when you know something important is inside. I didn't have to open it. I knew who it was from. Andre. His handwriting was shaky, like he was writing it with regret and sorrow weighing down each word. I set the letter down on the kitchen counter, and for a moment, I just stared at it. I folded the letter up, slowly, like I was handling something fragile. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel the sting of sadness I had expected. I just folded it, put it in the drawer next to my charger, alongside the things I had learned to lock away. His words were out there now, but I wasn't ready for them. Not yet. The next few weeks passed in a haze. Tyler and I grew closer, and I started seeing a different side of myself. The woman who made pies, who tended her garden, who could laugh again without holding back the ache. I didn't feel broken anymore. No, I felt whole. Then one day, a thought hit me like a quiet storm. Maybe I hadn't truly let go of Andre. Not yet. Maybe there was a part of me that still believed in him, still wanted him to rise above the man he had become. Maybe, just maybe, I could forgive him, but I knew that forgiveness had to come on my terms. Not his. It wasn't about him, it was about me. I thought back to the days when I had stood in the kitchen, making dinner for my family, waiting for them to come to the table. The warmth of those evenings, the smell of fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, and I realized that no matter how much time passed, no matter how many people tried to take pieces of me, I would always have those moments. The moments that made me who I am. The ones where I wasn't just a caretaker or a mother. I was Dolores. And Dolores didn't need permission from anyone to live her life. The weeks stretched on. I stayed busy with my life. I found new projects. I started working on things I had put aside for so long. But even with the steady routine, there was still that pull. The unspoken question. Would Andre come back? Would he try again? Then one afternoon, it happened. Tyler came running into the condo, her face pale. She didn't say a word at first, just handed me her phone. It was Andre. He wanted to talk. He said he'd been thinking about everything, about how he let me down, about the man he had become. I didn't know what to say. I just looked at the phone, my heart pounding, and then I looked out the window at the roses that had come back to life, stronger than they had ever been. Should I talk to him? I asked Tyler. She nodded, but she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I called Andre back. The conversation was quiet at first, just the sound of his voice on the other end, unsure, waiting for me to say something. "I'm sorry, Ma," he said, his voice soft. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted you to know that I know I hurt you. I lost myself in all of it, and I don't know how to fix it." I could hear the ache in his words. I could hear the regret, the brokenness that matched the empty space in my chest. But I also heard something else. I heard a man who was finally ready to face what he had done, not for me, but for himself. I didn't say anything for a while, just listened to him, feeling the years between us unravel with every second of silence. And when I finally spoke, my voice was steady, calm. "You lost me, Andre," I said. "You lost me when you let her turn me into something small. But I've already reclaimed what's mine." He didn't answer. I didn't need him to. We stayed on the line for a while. Neither of us hung up first. After that, things shifted. Not dramatically, but little by little, the walls between us began to crack. He came to visit sometimes, and we talked. Not about the house or the things we had lost, but about what was left. I could feel him trying, even when the words didn't come out right, and I could feel myself healing. In ways I hadn't expected. Tyler started coming by more often, bringing light into the condo. The mint in my garden grew, and the tomatoes ripened in the sun. The rosebush bloomed with new life. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. What was done, was done. But the one thing I had learned was that peace can't be rushed. It has to be earned. And I had earned it, with every quiet step I took. Andre didn't need to make things right. But if he kept showing up, if he kept working, he might find his way back to me. Until then, I had my garden, my peace, and most importantly, my life. And that was enough. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't demand to be heard. It just settles into the cracks, making its home where it's meant to be. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to survive. I was living. Truly living. The next few weeks were a whirlwind, but not in the chaotic way they used to be. This time, it was a gentle kind of busy. I focused on myself more than I ever had before. The community center became my new haven. The women there weren't strangers to pain. They had their stories, their battles. They knew what it meant to feel invisible, to be pushed aside when their time was supposed to come. But they also knew the power of standing tall, even when your knees trembled. I remember one afternoon, sitting at the small round table, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea. The smell of herbs and spices filled the room, but it was more than just the fragrance. It was the smell of second chances, of new beginnings. There was something incredibly comforting about this place. This circle of women who had seen too much to believe in fairy tales anymore. But still, they fought. They fought for their peace, for their dignity, for the joy that life promised them long ago. One woman, Ruth, an older soul with hands worn from years of sewing, looked at me one day after I'd shared a piece of my story with them. "Dolores," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you don't just protect what's yours. You teach the rest of us how to protect it too." Her words hit me like a wave. She was right. I didn't just reclaim my life. I'd set an example, a reminder to every woman in that room that we are not invisible, that our sacrifices don't mean we lose ourselves. Ruth's simple words stayed with me. I didn't just heal myself. I had sparked something in others, even if I didn't realize it at the time. Tyler, bless her heart, had become my anchor. She'd visit me every weekend, her energy infecting my small condo. She'd tell me all about her school and her friends, how much she had grown. I was proud of her, more than she could ever understand. She was no longer the little girl who looked at the world with wide, curious eyes. Now, she was becoming a young woman who knew her worth, who carried herself with strength. She wasn't afraid to stand up for herself, and she wasn't afraid to call out people who mistreated her. One Sunday, as we sat at the kitchen table, she told me something that made my heart swell with pride. "Grandma," she said, her voice serious yet soft, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about not letting people push you into the guest room of your own life." I smiled. She was listening. She was learning. "And you know," she continued, "I think I'm starting to understand what you mean. It's not just about standing up for myself. It's about knowing when to walk away from people who don't see me for who I am, just like you did." I squeezed her hand, feeling a mixture of love and relief. She wasn't just my granddaughter. She was the next generation of strong women, the kind who would no longer accept being silenced. I had fought for my peace, and now I saw her doing the same, at her own pace, in her own way. But as much as Tyler gave me strength, there were still days when I thought about Andre. The ache in my chest wasn't as sharp anymore, but it lingered, soft and unyielding. I'd spent so many years believing I would always be there for him, no matter what. Even when he took me for granted, when he let me slip away so easily, I had convinced that I was his foundation. And in many ways, I had been. But foundations can be cracked, and people can walk away from them. I learned that the hard way. I hadn't seen Andre in months, but he reached out again, this time through a letter. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope slowly. His handwriting hadn't changed. It still looked the same, urgent, like he had something important to say, but unsure of how to say it. "Ma," it started. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I see what I've done. I know I failed you. I know I hurt you. And I regret it more than I can put into words." I didn't cry when I read the letter, not this time. Instead, I folded it up and placed it in the drawer where I kept the papers from the sale of the house. I wasn't ready to respond. Not yet, but I knew this wasn't the closure I had been looking for. Closure doesn't come in neat little packages with apology letters and half-hearted regrets. Closure comes when you decide it's over. I went to the community center that day, feeling like I needed to do something with the silence that had settled inside me. I joined a group of women who were working on a project to help others like us. We were gathering donations for a local women's shelter, and I threw myself into it. There was something cathartic about doing this work. It was like putting all the pieces of myself back together. The women who had walked into the shelter seeking refuge were just like me, just like the women in the community center. They had stories to tell, pain to heal, and the same kind of strength that I had found. We weren't broken, we were just bent, and we were learning how to stand tall again. A month went by, and one evening, as I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a quiet resolve settle inside me. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer had a hold on me. I had come to terms with everything, the betrayal, the pain, the loss, and most importantly, I had learned how to let go of the idea that I needed anyone else to validate my existence. I didn't need Andre to apologize. I didn't need Kendra to change. I didn't need their approval to live my life. That's when I finally understood. Peace wasn't something I could find outside myself. It was something I had to cultivate from within, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Tyler came by one Saturday morning with a basket full of fresh fruit, her smile as wide as ever. She sat down next to me on the porch, the two of us in our favorite chairs. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, watching the birds fly by, listening to the distant hum of the neighborhood. "You've been quiet lately," she said, her voice gentle. "Everything okay, Grandma?" I looked at her, really looked at her. I had spent so many years protecting her, trying to shield her from the pain that life sometimes brings. But now, I realized she was the one who had been my strength. "I'm more than okay," I said, my voice steady. "I'm living." And I was. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living fully, freely, and on my own terms. The next day, as I went for another walk, I passed by the house I had once called home. It stood there, unchanged, but I knew it no longer held power over me. It was just a building now. The memories had faded, replaced by something stronger. My peace. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had everything I needed right here, in my heart, in my life, and in the love I gave to myself. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could ever give. Peace doesn't come from what we own or what we've lost. It comes from what we choose to keep: our dignity, our strength, and the ability to live without regret. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a quiet satisfaction, a knowing that no matter what came next, I was ready for it. I had survived the worst, and now, I was living the best part of my life. And for the first time, it felt like it was only just beginning.